For much of our existence as a species, we haven't had much access to power, and the medieval world was dominated by 4 forms of power: wood, wind, water, and manpower. The water, of course, has been with us for centuries. In the medieval period, what you're talking about are mill racers and mill wheels, grinding corn, running hammers, that sort of thing. Wood for construction and fuel, well, it was the lifeblood of the medieval man. Wind, mostly used for milling grain, is another well-known source, but perhaps the most well-known source of power in medieval times was man. And man, together with some amazing machines, was used to create some of the most incredible structures across Europe. Have you ever heard of the treadmill crane? Medieval invention, and they look like this. They were used all over medieval Europe, and these things were amazing. With one man they could lift up to 4 tons, with 2 men 8 to 10 tons, and they were just awesome things. Built mostly from oak and iron, a treadmill crane could weigh over a ton. Sometimes human power actually is surprising in the amount of power that it can generate, and it struck me particularly when I saw this, which was a hamster wheel desk. But it struck me that could actually be used. Now, I've wanted to do this for ages. The thing that's put me off is that a treadmill crane requires a central axle, but that hamster wheel desk doesn't. So I need 2 big wooden wheels. There's quite a few ways of going around that. But the way I thought I'd do it actually is using a technique called cold moulding. Cold moulding is actually brilliant. We've used it before when we made a skateboard, but it's used all over the place. You see it in furniture, you see it used as boats for the stem, keel and ribs, and you'll see it in roof trusses. All it really is bending bits of wood and gluing them together. When you bend the bit of wood and apply the glue, it keeps its bend, and it keeps its bend perfectly. Now, a lot of the time, people are worried about things like that, and I don't know why, because it is essentially really simple stuff. You need a mould. Now, when you say a mould, it's just rough and ready. This is my mould. It's a semicircle, and it's obviously made out of scrap timber that I've screwed to the bench in a semicircular shape. That's the mould. And what I'm going to do is take these thin bits of wood, which are cut from plywood. They're 5mm thick, 2.4 metres long, and they've got a nice arc to them when they bend. Now, being 5mm thick, if I try to bend them too far, they're of course going to snap. If I have a tighter radius of curve, well, I want thinner timber. If my radius of curve isn't particularly great, I can glue up thicker timber. I have to glue as many pieces. But I've chosen 5mm, and I have 7 strakes to go around that bend to make my semicircle. Then I put 2 semicircles together. That'll make my wheel. Like I say, cold moulding, super simple. Depends quite a lot on the glue. There's a lot of choices with the glue. I mean, one thing you can use is this stuff, which to be honest is spectacular, but difficult to apply. So the Gorilla Glue, the wood glue, is easier to apply, but not as tough as this stuff here. And the stuff I'm going to use is this, Cascamite. Cascamite is almost universally the boat builder's glue. It's weatherproof, it's gap filling, easy to use and relatively cheap, because this is quite expensive actually, and you use a lot of it. You mix up your Cascamite. With Cascamite you only need to paint one side of the wood. With this stuff it's better to do both sides. With this stuff you do one side. Paint your one side of the wood with Cascamite and then bend it around your former. So we just put that around the former and bend it. When we bend it we need to hold it against the former, and again there's options. You can use clamps if you happen to have a million of them. You can use a luggage strap. Because we're going to be screwing into this, equally we could just screw them down onto each other. 6 hours later you can take them off and it's done. So cold moulding, really simple technique, really useful for doing a ton of things, and that's exactly what we're going to do now. So let's mix up some Cascamite. Okay, you got about an hour's working time with this stuff, which is quite a lot really, so you don't have to be too anal about it. But basically brush it on and lay it against your former. Now your mould, obviously you don't want you sticking wood to it. You have to do something to protect it. I've seen lots of people using lumps of plastic, which to be honest is really irritating because the plastic gets in the way. So I actually oil it. I just put some oil on there. Now on something like this, where there's going to be no finish on it particularly, to be honest, it doesn't really matter. Equally, fixing it down, you use screws, sashes, clamps, whatever it is you've got. Again, it's going to depend on your finish. So if you're going to have a fine bit of furniture, you probably don't want a whole lot of screws in there. If you're going to have a wheel like me, a few screws doesn't matter. Equally, the finish doesn't matter. Now, I've found that the oil will come off relatively easily with a bit of acetone. So I give the wood a clean with acetone and then get a finish on it. But it does stop it sticking to your mould, and you do need something that's going to stop it doing that. Otherwise, you'll be chiseling the mould off from your formed bit of wood from now until doomsday. So just cut one side, lay the other bit on top, and continue that process until you've got all of the bits done, because the drying time means this has got slip. It is going to slip when we try and get it on the mould. So you again don't need to be too anal about it. It's all glued up into the former. Now, lots of people have lots of different ways of doing this, and it can be a bit of a pain. So I've marked halfway and knock it down to make sure everything is nice. We can put a clamp on here to start with, or a whole row of screws. Okay, to get this going, I put a couple of clamps on it, and that allowed me to hook this luggage strap around it. So we can take the clamps off now, tighten up the luggage strap, and that should pull everything nice and tight in that bow. You might want to go around as well with a mallet to make sure everything's nice and level. Then all we do is leave it to dry. So when it's dried and you get it out the mould, that's what you get. You get basically a bit of plywood formed to whatever shape you want. Now, I need to make another 11 of these for the thing that I'm making. Now we have to join those sections together. Join those sections together, we get two massive wheels. So let's join the sections together. There you go, two big wooden hoops. Now we're... So for the sled, I've just knocked up a couple of plywood boxes. Now we drill a couple of holes in here, run a bit of 8mm bar, and use longboard wheels as the bearings, because they're pretty chunky, pretty thick, and they're meant to take an adult. Once you've done that, what you end up with is that. So the big wheel sits here. These two sides get joined together. That's our hamster wheel. Okay, that's the sled together. Now I put these in because once you get this going, it's got a fair bit of inertia. Really, it's quite difficult to stop. But there's going to be a handrail. There's the sled finished, and all I need to do now is put the big wheel in and give it a go. Ta-da! Now I feel like I'm in a Da Vinci drawing. The thing works beautifully. It does get some inertia going, so you need a handle. Now I've seen these with desks on that you can hold on to, and just like the one that I showed you, but if we get into this, that actually is awesome! So that's the basic wheel done. Now we're going to turn it into a generator, of course. And that's little more than strapping a motor. So there are 100 different motors you might go for. You might go for something like this, which is a hoverboard motor, but I'm going to use my good old favourite tiny NEMA stepper motor. We're going to use that. Pop one of those onto it. It's a flexible couple, and we've got a bit of rubber tape to put around that couple so that it's got a little bit of grip, and I will stack that on some wood until it meets the longboard wheel. I mean, basic, I know. Should work though. Okay, nothing fancy here. Move along, nothing to see. All I've done is glue the stepper onto a stack of wood so it's the right height, and we can pop that in there. Jam it up against the longboard wheel, and when the longboard wheel turns, well, the stepper motor turns, and you can see that happening. Now the ratio is 100 to 1 because we've got 25 to 1 coming down to the longboard wheel from the big wheel to the longboard wheel, and then a 4 to 1 going from the longboard wheel to the stepper motor. We've obviously got 4 points of contact, so we're going to do one and see how it performs. Now all we've got to do is screw that in place. Okay, so we've got it set up. I've got 2 loads to try out. One's a bunch of LEDs like 35 volts, and the other is a filament light bulb, which is basically just a resistive lamp, obviously. We've got the meter connected up to it. I've got the phone playing on the meter, so we're going to give it a spin up and see what we get. Wow. 68 volts, mate. 77.
Wow!
68 volts if I walk, 77 if I waddle. Let's try the amps. Wind up for amps and see what we get. So about 0.8 of an amp. Go 50, 60 watts, ballpark figure, somewhere around about there. And I had no trouble at all in turning that, so I'm pretty sure I could get another single motor on there. And maybe 4, I'm not sure about 4, might be a bit difficult then, because remember, it's the torque I can put in. Now, why did it work so well? It worked so well just because of the gear ratio. We used this with the 100 to 1 gear ratio, so of course, I'm turning that about 10 RPM, it's doing about 1000 RPM, it's going to give out some volts and amps, that's the way it is. Let's be honest, this idea of a big wheel might seem a little cracked at first, but actually it's the growing trend for at-desk exercising, and it's not only being applied to people, you're finding this as a massive trend in pet exercise with cat wheels. And they're designed in exactly the same way that we just designed the big wheel, and you're finding dog wheels as dog exerciser wheels. So they're a huge growing trend in both pet care and in human health when it comes to the fight against the sedentary lifestyle that we lead. Now the thing that we built produces about 120 watts. That's enough to run a PlayStation. So perhaps you could get the kids off the sofa, and while they're playing their games they could do a walk or a run at the same time. Anyway, when you can make those wheels, you can make that generator, that cat wheel, that dog wheel, that kid wheel, whichever wheel you want. The trick is the big hoops that we made. Once you make those, you're making anything you want. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to like and subscribe.